Hi everyone. So the purpose of today's video is to go back over the story, The Rocking Horse Winter, which we were asked to read, and to discuss some of the finer elements of the writing in the short story, kind of question some of the choices that our author, D.H. Lawrence, makes as he discusses the story, and to talk about its relevance to the American dream and the materialism that is kind of inherent in the idea of the American dream. So to start off, D.H. Lawrence was influenced strongly by the writings and the workings of Sigmund Freud. He was very interested in what happens psychologically and psychiatry, and also Lawrence also had a fascination between the relationship between mother and child. And he thought that a lot of the problems that we had with psychosis came back to the way we were parented. Certainly this story falls into those lines because the narrator tells us right from the very beginning that this mother is very beautiful. She does not love her children. And certainly the children sense that and understand that. Let's take a look at the way Lawrence chooses to begin his story. He says, there was a beautiful woman who started life with all the advantages, but she had no luck. She married for love, and the love turned to dust. She had lovely children, yet she felt they had been forced upon her and could not love them. It's a really interesting way to start a story because it has a very fairy tale feel to it. It also sounds like we're going to start on a fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was a woman, but then it quickly changes directions on us because it starts off telling us that she is beautiful and she had all the advantages, but she had no luck. She married for love, and wasn't that unfortunate? It's interesting because generally we think of marrying for love to be a good thing, but the story starts off talking about giving us the impression that that was unfortunate that she married for love. She also had lovely children, but it says she could not love them. Luck is mentioned in the very first sentence, and the idea of luck will pervade this entire story. And it's interesting to talk about its connections with the American dream. Generally, when we talk about the American dream, the idea of hard work usually comes up. For many people, the American dream is the belief that if you come to this country and you work hard, you put everything into it, you can make your life better. In rare circumstances, but they have happened, some people have come from very humble beginnings and have made themselves into billionaires. It has happened, but it doesn't happen much. So it begs you to wonder, is the full realization of the American dream a result of hard work? Is it a result of luck? Or most probably, it's a combination of those two things. But this story seems to give us the impression that the characters think it's solely the result of luck. In the second paragraph, the story says, they looked at her coldly as if they had found a weakness in her character. She wanted to find a way to cover up her weakness, but she didn't know what it was. Whenever her children were present, she felt the center of her heart go hard. This troubled her. And in her manner, she was all the more gentle and concerned for her children, as if she loved them very much. So also in the beginning of the story, we have this conflict between the way things look in this family and the way things actually are. And the use of stone imagery, as we talked about in our class discussion, is important. And we see it begin here where it says she felt the center of her heart go hard. So she pretends to be something that she is not. And we see later on in the story that she pretends that they have money. They live far beyond their means. They don't have as much money as she wants it to look like they have. So that also kind of makes us question whether the American dream is really a dream based on how we appear to our neighbors. Do we appear to fit in the lifestyle that we have, that we want to, or not? The story, the narrator lets us know that the only people who know that the mother doesn't love her children is the mother and her children. The mother knows she doesn't love them, and the children sense it. By the fourth paragraph, we're back to that fairy tale language again, where it says, there were a boy and two little girls. They lived in a pleasant house with a nice garden. They had good servants and felt themselves better than anyone else in the neighborhood. So that idea of superiority comes back. Now, let's just go back briefly and talk about why the author would choose to start off with fairy tale language. Well, it leads the reader with the expectation that this is going to be a story filled with magic, and usually fairy tales have a happy ending. So we expect, perhaps, that this story will end happily. That the children will find love, the mother will find love for her child, that people will find happiness. And of course, if you've read the story, you know that is not what happens. Also, another important thing that I'd like to talk about, though, is inherent in the American dream is a certain amount of magic. For some people, it just seems like, bam, all of a sudden they're rich. It can happen suddenly. You can win the lottery. All of a sudden, you can become a YouTube star. You can become a rock star. And all of a sudden, everything changes. And you have all the material belongings that you could ever possibly want. That idea of that magic, that miraculous way of the American dream unfolding is also a little part of our mythology regarding that dream. The mother does decide to try to do something with her life. She she says, I will see if I can make something, but she did not know where to begin. She doesn't really even know how to make anything. In her mind, money comes from luck, and that's just kind of magical. She tries to do something, but she can't find anything to do, and therefore the whispering in the house becomes more and more prevalent. There must be more money. There must be more money. That whispering takes on this frantic urgency in the story, which definitely raises the tension of the story. The children know, even though everything around them looks like it's the way it should be, and the mother overtly acts like she is concerned for their welfare, and they have the best toys in their playroom, they're also aware that there is not enough money, that there is need there. And this need becomes desperate, especially for Paul. It says this whispering came from the movement of the rocking horse, and even the horse, bending its wooden head impatiently to go faster, heard it. So the idea of there must be more money, raises the tension in the story and makes it seem like we have to go faster, we have to get more money. And the rocking horse seems to reflect that as well. It says the children could hear it at Christmas when the expensive and wonderful toys filled the playroom. Behind the shining, modern rocking horse, behind the smart doll's house, a voice would say, there must be more money. There must be more money. Interesting that the author uses the word shiny and modern to describe this rocking horse, which seems new and shiny and perfect. It reminds me, if you've ever read Inherit the Wind, of the description of Golden Dancer, the rocking horse, which was shiny on the outside and seemed like it was perfect, but on the inside it was rotten underneath. Nobody ever says the words, but the children hear them there. And one day, Paul has a conversation with his mother where he says, Mother, why don't we have a car of our own? And she says, well, because we're the poor people of the family. And, she clarifies to him. And he says, well, why are we poor? And she says, well, it's because your father has no luck. And she definitely leads her child to think that, the way to love, the way to earn her love and her happiness is through money, and the way to money is through luck. And if you think that way, if you think if I work really hard, I will become wealthy, at least you have some control over how hard you work. But if your impression is that wealth comes from some miraculous luck that just comes from the sky and nobody knows how to get it, nobody knows who has it, it's just God, I guess. He just gives it to you or he doesn't give it to you and nobody knows. If you believe that way, then you don't have a lot of control over your destiny. So she tells it to this child, and this child, I'm sure, is thinking about the way into his mother's affection and his mother's heart. He knows she's unhappy, and she starts him thinking about the idea of luck and where you get luck. And he says to her, I'm lucky. And she kind of laughs and says, oh, are you really? He says, yes, I am. And then he decides she says to him, well, who told you were lucky? And he says, God did. And she kind of says, excellent. Now you can see she's kind of dismissive to the boy. She doesn't really believe him. So he decides, of course, that he must prove it to her. And he decides to set himself to discovering the secret of luck. Where do you find it? Where can you get it? So he basically becomes very introverted. He keeps to himself. And he gets on his rocking horse and rides it with, it says, such a mad energy that it worried his sisters. And when he's ridden to the end of his mad little journey, he climbs down and looks at the rocking horse in the eye and says, take me to luck. Interesting how the horse is described here. It was described as shiny and modern earlier. Now it says the horse looked wild with its red mouth slightly open and its wide and bright glass eyes. So remember that description, because later the author is going to use those same kind of words to describe Paul after he is ridden and while he's riding the horse. He would hit the horse with his whip, and he knew the horse would take him to where there was luck if only he forced it. And he would ride wildly until he got there. And of course, what we're asked to believe now in this kind of fairy tale-ish story is that the boy rides the horse wildly and gets caught up in it. And somehow, when he gets to where he's going, when he gets to luck, he knows the winner of the next big horse race. And he has entered into a little partnership with their servant, Basset, who likes the horse races. And he starts to, make some money. And his uncle walks into the nursery one day and finds him riding. And he just says, like, hey, where are you going? What's your horse's name? And he discovers that the boy is really interested in the horse races. And he's delighted to find this out at first. But he's a little bit surprised at what the boy tells him. So Oscar goes to talk to Basset, and Basset says, Master Paul comes and asks me about racing, and I can do more than tell him, sir, said Basset. His face was terribly serious, as if he were talking of religious matters. Now, there's a lot of religious imagery in this story. It started earlier when the mother told the boy that, probably God is the person who tells you if you're lucky or not. Now, when Uncle Oscar goes to talk to Basset, Basset is very serious, as if he were talking of religious matters. And when Basset describes what happens with the little boy, Basset is very serious, and he says, it's like it comes from heaven. When the boy understands who's going to win, he says it's like it comes from heaven. It's like magical. The boy, too, is very serious when he talks about this, as if he were talking about religious matters. And at one point, Basset is described as being serious as a church. So these things, this religious imagery starts here, and it just builds throughout the story. Now, what is kind of interesting, too, when you think about the religious imagery, really, is the idea that in church, there are lots of statues. They are supposed to be representations of saints or important people, important figures in the church. And we pray, hopefully, to the religious figure, not to the actual statue. But what's happening here is the horse, that rocking horse, is, the author's drawing parallels between that and some kind of a religious statue. Okay? Now, why is the author doing this with his religious imagery? Well, somehow it connects to the idea of luck and the idea of luck being kind of magical. But it also, I think he's perhaps trying to ask the readers to think about, has money and our search for materialistic wealth become a new religion to people? Has that become what we worship rather than other more spiritual things? Has money become the new spiritual goal for us? And of course, the story suggests that if that is the case, if money has become the new religion, we cannot expect a happy ending to that. Uncle Oscar kind of joins in on the partnership between Basset and Paul, and he is shocked, especially because whenever Paul predicts a winner, it's not the obvious winner. And Uncle Oscar thinks that's ridiculous. That horse isn't going to win. He's not favored to win at all. And yet miraculously he does. So more luck, more miracle, more magic with Paul. Paul makes it clear to his uncle that the reason he's earning this money is to help his mother because his mother has no luck. And Oscar agrees that is the case, and he agrees to help him. And they decide they're going to give the mother $1,000 or £1,000, sorry, every year for her birthday for the next 5 years. And Paul waits with anxiety, his mother opening up this letter, telling her such on her birthday. And when she gets it, the reaction is not what you would think. She's quiet. She's very stone-like, very cold. Paul says, "Did you get anything nice in the post for your birthday?" And she says, "A little bit of nice." The next thing she does is she calls the lawyer to find out if she can get all of the money at once. She's supposed to get £1,000 a year for 5 years, but she thinks, "I want it all right now." And Paul and Uncle talk about that. They go, "Yeah, I guess that would be okay." So she gets the money. I guess the important thing you need to note is that it does not make her happy. When she gets the letter saying she's got £1,000, she wants all of it right now. And when she gets all of it right now, she's still not happy. They have more stuff. They have more things. Paul has a private school, but there's no indication that the mother has gained in her happiness. Which just gives us the idea that the more money you have, the more money you want. You are never secure in your place. And the problem with going up the social ladder in terms of, I should say, socioeconomic ladder, is that when you get to the next level, there is an enormous amount of pressure to stay there or to go further. It's not bringing her happiness. This is, of course, making the boy more and more frantic and making the pressure for him to, find the next source of his luck even more urgent. He says at one point when he's talking to the uncle, he tells him about the house whispering, and he says that his mother had been receiving legal papers for money that they couldn't pay, and his uncle said he knew that. And the boy says, "And then the house whispers, like people laughing at you behind your back." So there is the idea that a part of the American dream has to do with how you appear to others, more about appearance than reality. That becomes very important to the characters in this story. There must be more money. There must be more money. The house whispering becomes even more serious, and it frightens Paul terribly. He now becomes desperate to find the next winner. And one night when the mother and father go out to a party, Paul is upstairs in his room. By now, Paul is quite old. Far too old to be riding a rocking horse, by the way. I mean, he's, I guess, probably in his early, I would say 10 or 11 probably. He's a bigger kid, not the kind of kid that, you'd find on a rocking horse, which is usually like a 2 or 3-year-old. He's riding his rocking horse like a crazy person. And when the mother comes in, she is completely shocked. He gets done and he says, "It's Malabar." He has gotten to the point. He's made it to luck and he knows the next winner. It will be Malabar. But it says at the end of that story, he looks at his mother with shining eyes. And for one strange and senseless second, he stopped pushing his wooden horse. So when he is on this horse, when he gets done, he almost looks like the horse with those glassy, wild eyes, full of a frantic speed. He was not wrong. Malabar wins the next race. And the uncle, although he knows it's wrong, puts a bunch of money on the horse, which is an interesting little side detail that the author tells us. I found that kind of interesting, that despite the fact that the uncle feels bad about the boy dying, he's still going to bet on the horse because, that's important. When Bassett comes back in the room, he says, "You're right, Paul. You were right. Malabar won." And Paul dies that night. He says he bet 1,000 on it. And he says, "I never told you, Mother, that if I can ride my horse and get there, then I am absolutely sure." "Oh, absolutely, Mother. Did I ever tell you I am lucky?" "No, you never did," is the only thing the mother says to that. And the boy dies that night. And the closing line, I think, is important. As he lays dead, the mother hears the brother's voice say, "My God, Hester, you're 8,000 pounds to the good and a poor son to the bad. But poor, poor boy, he's best gone out of a life where he rides his rocking horse to find a winner." The ending implies that he's better off in another world than a world where you have to buy your love and you have to somehow find, sell your soul, I guess, to get the material wealth that you need to earn love and respect from people. The story starts off with this, religious imagery, and it leads you to think that Paul is getting his luck from God. But then when the child dies, the phrase, "oh, poor devil," makes you think that perhaps Paul's luck is coming not from God, but from the other direction. Because any goal that is associated with material gain is doomed to fail, is doomed for disaster, as this story suggests. So there's a lot of central ideas in this story that you can talk about. There are a lot of things that come to the forefront. One of them is that, when is money ever enough? And, the old adage, money can't buy you love, although it's definitely a cliche, it's definitely found in this story. Though there are much deeper things. The religious imagery, the stone imagery that is in this story, the symbolism of the rocking horse. Horses in general in literature symbolize strength and power and speed. They were certainly in their time a demonstration of a person's wealth and status in the society. They also have a connotation with horse racing and luck and gambling, if you will. All of these things make the rocking horse an interesting symbol to explore. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you got some ideas and some things that you can use in your study of this story. Thanks for watching.